Episode 66 of 211's Baseball Talk is here. We'll talk all about the Blue Jays Royals series, the Blue Jays Red Sox mini series, some hot starts around the league, and more. Make sure to stay tuned. 211's Baseball Talk episode 66 begins right after this. That was Balance by Infinite walking you into episode 66 of 211's Baseball Talk. My name is Dylan Baker. Joined beside me once again, my dad, Chris. How you doing today?
I'm good, Dylan. It's a good day to be a baseball fan. The only reason for that is the Jays finally got a win last night. And we're talking Red Sox Jays for those not knowing what date this episode is on. The 21st, I believe, right, Dylan, is the win, and we'll take it.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad, as I'm excited to talk some Jays. Not a great series in Kansas City. We'll get into it a little bit, but a much better one of sorts in Boston for the Blue Jays. Is jumping right into that Kansas City series. After starting 6-6, the Jays went into KC without a starter as they faced the Royals. Eventually, it was announced that Anthony Kay would get a start over guys like Tanner Roark and Tommy Milone as the Jays faced Jacob Junis. Before the game, it was also announced that Jordan Romano was headed to the IL, another loss for that Blue Jays bullpen. An RBI double from Andrew Benintendi in the first got the Royals rolling early, 1-0. In the bottom of the third, Nicky Lopez had a questionably scored triple to make it 2-0. That was followed by the first of two errors from Kevin Biggio to score a run. In the bottom of the fourth, Hunter Dozier and Hanser Alberto both doubled to make it 5-0. In the same inning, another Kevin Biggio error, which he got hurt on, resulted in another run, making it 7-0. However, in the sixth inning, the Jays started the comeback with a two-run double from Joe Panik, then a Rowdy Tellez single and a Josh Palacios sac fly to make it 7-4. In the top of the seventh, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hit a mammoth home run to make it 7-5. A chance to win it in the ninth, but Vladdy struck out to end the game. On Friday, the game was rained out. Therefore, we had a doubleheader on Saturday as game one featured Steven Matz and Mike Minor. And in the first of the doubleheader, the only game of the series that the Jays won, Lourdes Gurriel doubled home two in the first inning to make it 2-zip Jays. No scoring after that until the top of the fifth when Jonathan Davis hit a homer that was bigger than Lake Ontario. Only true Blue Jays fans would get that reference. And by that point, people started to notice the goose egg in the Royals hit column and began watching a no-no for Steven Matz. However, in a seven-inning game, a no-hitter does not count. Luckily for Jays fans and historians alike, after a solo home run on the top of the sixth by Vlad Guerrero Jr., the no-hitter was broken up by the Royals. They then got on the board in the bottom of the sixth on an Andrew Benintendi double. Then in the seventh, Marcus Semien had a sac fly to make it 5-1 Jays. They took game one of that doubleheader. In game two, it was Tommy Milone versus Irvin Santana in a matchup that felt like 2012 again. Top of the second, Alejandro Kirk got the scoring started with a laser double as he began hitting up to put the Jays ahead 1-0, pardon me. In the bottom of the third, though, Andrew Benintendi drove home a run on a fielder's choice and an error. Then Carlos Santana doubled home another run to make it 2-1 Royals. In the top of the fourth, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. hit a sac fly to tie things up. No scoring after that until the seventh. Bottom half, Joel Payamps was on the mound since the Blue Jays' depth has been shredded to pieces with injuries. And Salvador Perez walked it off, so the Jays split the double dip. Sunday afternoon, the Jays sent Robbie Ray to the mound against Brady Singer. Early on, you could tell Ray didn't have his stuff, and Brady Singer was going to shut down the Jays. Ray wound up walking 6 in 5, somehow scoreless innings. And after using Dolis yesterday, TJ Zoik had to pitch a high leverage inning, which was an adventure, to say the least, as he allowed a leadoff laser to single to Carlos Santana. Then Salvador Perez hit a home run to make it 2-0. That would be all the scoring in that game. Jays didn't get a hit after the third. It dropped 3 of 4 to the Royals. Obviously not a great series for the Blue Jays. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it wasn't a great series, but it hasn't been a great season. Let's be honest. So far, we've seen some bright spots. Obviously, Vladdy being one of them, but it is an injury decimated team. It is a underperforming team, if you ask me. Although some people say they expected this. Especially with that rotation, and that's possible. I mean, the rotation certainly isn't what we all had hoped they would acquire throughout the offseason. But, I mean, there were a few bright spots. Again, Vladdy being a bit of a bright spot. Was concerned about Kevin Biggio's defense, but that was kind of a scary thing to watch before he got hurt. But he's been pretty good all season long, so I don't think that's too bad. But I think it was a tough series for the Blue Jays, and one we'll hopefully soon forget.
Yeah, it wasn't ideal both on the pitching side and on the offensive side for the Blue Jays as they struggled on both ends of the ball in that one. But you know what? There were some bright spots, like you mentioned. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. stayed hot. Obviously, Bo Bichette, Marcus Semien, they both cooled right down. Bichette sort of picked it back up in the Boston series, although it was only 2 games. We'll get into that in a moment. But yeah, the Kansas City series was not ideal. You can't really expect a very good team to go into Kansas City and lose 3 out of 4. You got to at least split that series. And they didn't do that. So that was a struggle for the Blue Jays. And we hope that they will play better in the future as they went over to Boston to face the red hot Red Sox. They faced off for a quick 2-game series this week at Fenway. And in game 1, things were going well for the Jays to start as Ryu was cruising and the Jays got on the board first with a 4th inning Bo Bichette home run. That all changed in the bottom half of that inning when Xander Bogaerts hit his own homer over the monster to make it 3-1. Then with Martin Gonzalez on, Bobby Dahlbeck tripled to make it 4-1. Ryu went 5, giving up 4, all earned. The Jays didn't get on the board again until the top of the 7th when Randall Grichuk hit his own homer over the monster to make it 4-2. After that, they were shut down. So Sox win 4-2. But if there was one positive, it was the bullpen continued to be solid. Wednesday night, after a 30-minute rain delay following a lineup shakeup, a Vlad Guerrero Jr. single scored Kevin Biggio to make it 1-0 Jays in the first. In the second, after a single from Marcus Semien, a walk from Josh Palacios, and a wild pitch, Lourdes Gurriel had a sacrifice fly to make it 2-0. Kevin Biggio followed that up with a ground up, making it 3-zip. Then Bo Bichette singled Danny Jansen home to make it 4-0 early. Trent Thornton was on the mound for the Jays on a bullpen day. He threw 2 scoreless to start the game. He was relieved by Tommy Malone, who went 2 1/3 innings, allowing 2 earned runs, the first of which scored in the bottom of the 4th when Rafael Devers grounded out to score a run. In the 5th, at this point, Malone is out of the game and David Phelps is in. But with 2 Malone runners on, Phelps surrenders a double to make it 4-2. In the bottom of the 8th, as usual, Rafael Dolis made an adventure for himself, giving up a home run to Xander Bogaerts early in the inning to make it 4-3. Following his second strikeout of the inning, he walked Christian Vasquez, and then an error by Kevin Biggio got 2 guys on, but in what felt like an eternity later, Dolis got out of it. Top of the 9th, the Jays needed insurance. Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero Jr. get on, and Rowdy Tellez set to face the lefty, Taylor on the mound, Alejandro Kirk comes in as a pinch hitter. And he drove home Bo Bichette, sent Vladdy to third to make it 5-3 Jays. 11 Alejandro Kirk hit. The very next pitch, Randall Grichuk scored Vladdy and sent Kirk to third to make it 6-3. In the bottom of the 9th, Tim Meza ran into some trouble. He only recorded 2 outs in that inning, but Anthony Castro came on to relieve him and close the door to get his first big league save. Jays win 6-3. Despite the Wednesday game, the offense is struggling, and it was announced this week that there's a possibility that George Springer gets back this weekend, that Teoscar Hernandez gets back this weekend. Is that enough to reignite this scuffling Blue Jays offense?
I think it is. I think, obviously they've never even seen Springer in a regular season game yet. And I think, that in itself is huge. I mean, obviously it's nice to get Hernandez back as well on the weekend, hopefully. But what's really cool is to see that Springer's potentially coming back this week because they haven't had a chance to have him in the lineup in any regular season games. And here's the hope that, maybe that will spark the offense and will spark some more wins. And they really need that. I mean, losing 3 out of 4 against Kansas City is, as you said, not acceptable at all for a team that's expected to make the playoffs or at least compete for a spot in the playoffs. And I think getting Springer back, I think getting Hernandez back is going to help at least inject some life into this offense. Again, like you say, yesterday was fine as far as the 6-3 win, but we haven't seen that recently other than Vladdy, and as you said, Bo has cooled off and others. So and I do like a Kirk hit. There's always it's well, it's fun just to watch him run the bases, really. But
He's a
but
55 speed in MLB The Show. I think he's faster than Danny Jansen, than Lourdes Gurriel. I don't know if that rating is accurate, but
I
I'll
don't
take it.
think it is. I don't think it is. It could be, but I don't think so. And so yeah, it's I think it's going to be a good thing for them this weekend to get that injection back into the offense. We need some pitching back though.
Yeah, for sure. But it sounds like some bullpen help is on its way, as Tyler Chatwood and Jordan Romano are both expected to be activated in the Rays series. Chatwood on before Friday's game and Romano before Saturday's game, both immediately when they're eligible to come off the IL. It sounded like both the injuries were minor. They just needed some time to rest up a little bit. Jay's got an arm up in the big leagues to fill their spots for the time being. Now, with Springer and Teoscar hopefully being back, what is your ideal lineup? I mean, there are so many different ways you could look at this. There are about 3, 4 guys you could have in the leadoff spot. You could hit Vladdy second if you wanted to. What is your optimal lineup construction?
I think you have to put Springer in leadoff. I don't think there's any chance you don't do that. And I don't think there's any chance we'll see Montoyo not do that. The only reason he might not do that is just to let him ease back in. But Springer's a professional. He's been around for a long time. He knows how to win. Most likely, he doesn't need the easing back in. So I would expect to see him hitting leadoff with Bichette second, maybe Hernandez third, Vladdy fourth, and then down from there. It's I think that's your top four potentially. I know Gurriel has some potential there to be up there, but I mean that for me would be my top four to start off that lineup.
Yeah, I like that. I think that George Springer has to be your leadoff hitter. And I was talking about it on Twitter yesterday with Mitty from the Smitty and Mitty show. We both agreed that George Springer has to be the leadoff hitter once he comes back for the Blue Jays. And I think that it'll probably go Springer, Bichette, Guerrero, and then Teoscar, because I know Charlie Montoya likes to have Teoscar in that cleanup spot. So I think that's where they'll leave him. And then after that, I mean, it's anybody's guess. It can be a mishmash of guys. You can have Grichuk hit fifth, or you can have him hit eighth. It doesn't really matter how you structure it. I think Kevin Biggio may be a 6 hitter, and it was brought to my attention by Mitty yesterday that maybe the 9 spot is a good spot for him as a second leadoff man. What are your thoughts on that idea?
No, no Jansen in the ninth spot.
But the point he brought up, the point that was brought up by Mitty was that Jansen's become an automatic out in the 9 spot. And do you want that hitting before George Springer, who's supposed to be a guy who can drive in runs, hitting out of that leadoff spot?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's true because maybe he can drive in some runs if you've got Biggio on base. I mean, he's not a slow runner either, like Jansen would be too. So even if Jansen got hot, you'd probably have a better shot at scoring some runs with Biggio out there instead. But again, putting Jansen in the 8th spot, I don't know how much better that is. I mean, he's still an automatic out, just he might be more likely the first out of the inning instead of the second or third, but he's still an automatic out always.
Yeah.
Now, if you have Kirk in there, that's different, and Kirk isn't as much of an automatic out. He's certainly not offensively, the best out there, but
Well,
he's better than Jansen.
He's hit throughout the minor leagues, and he's had a bit of a slow start to the season, but he seems to be hitting now, and he's hit in the past. So do you think that Alejandro Kirk should start getting more ABs over Danny Jansen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's good defensively. He's not as good as Danny, but that doesn't mean he can't get there. And, it's, I think from an offensive standpoint, he certainly contributes a heck of a lot more than Jansen does. So, and that offensive standpoint's really what the Jays need right now. I mean, the pitching's not been awesome, but it's not been
the starting pitching hasn't
either.
been good, but the bullpen has been pretty good.
Yeah, the bullpen has really picked up the team while the starters have kind of pooped the futon, deuced the futon, as I said last season on this show. But yeah, it's I think having Biggio in that 9th spot actually is a pretty good idea, just to give that on base possibility for Springer, as you say. But I think for sure the guarantee is that Springer's in the leadoff spot.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. As the sun is starting to bless me here. I've got sun in my eyes. We're recording the podcast at a different time today due to some other prior engagements. So if the sun is, if the sun is in my eyes, that is why. The bullpen has been solid so far this season. They've got a low ERA. It's among the best in Major League Baseball. How impressive has it been to you?
Good. I mean, great. I mean, how can you complain about it? Unfortunately, they're coming in with on the losing side of things at a very frequent pace, but I think that will change. I think that the starters, despite being such an up in the air rotation, will improve. I think, I don't know if we've received a recent update on Pearson, but once we get a Pearson
Pearson's
back.
100% healthy. It's just he's ramping back up, so he's got to basically do spring training again and get back up to 100% pitch wise.
Yeah, so that'll be a big addition. Ryu, obviously, that was more of a blip on the radar in Boston. I don't think it's anything to worry about. So you got two guys there that hopefully will contribute some better results. But the rest of it's a hot mess, and luckily the bullpen has been there to sort of bail everybody out.
Yeah, I agree. I think the bullpen has been fantastic for the Jays so far this season. I mean, guys are coming in without Romano, without Chatwood. I mean, you expected Kirby Yates to be there. He's not. Julian Merriweather is out, and that sounds like it could be a long-term thing. The amount of guys that have stepped up and filled those spots, maybe not as well as the guys would have done had they been healthy, guys like Romano, Merriweather, Chatwood, but they're still putting on really good performance. Like Joel Piamps has an ERA right around or just below 2. Anthony Castro has been formidable ever since he got called up after being picked up by the Jays from the Tigers on waivers in the offseason. Everybody seems to be contributing to this Blue Jays bullpen, and it's been a sight to see. All right, now for our segment, the two best and the worst of this past week. Who is your best pitcher from the past week in Blue Jays baseball?
Boy, that's a tough one. I don't know
There
that
hasn't
that's
been a
an
lot
even.
of good pitching in the past
I
week.
was just gonna say that I don't know that that's a fair question, and so I'm gonna say Pete Walker.
Is that your
I'm
final
gonna
answer?
say that's my final answer. There's nobody else out there, just Pete Walker. Handlebar mustache that makes him the best. And even though he's not actually on the mound, he was at some point and
He is
did
the
better
spirit.
than everybody's done in the last week. So yeah, he is.
I would have to go with Steven Matz. I mean, Matz almost threw a
Yeah,
seven
Mats was
inning no
good too. I
hitter.
would I would actually go with Mats if you're asking for a real pitcher. But
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you totally, Mats.
Yeah, Matz had a great outing on Saturday. Almost threw a 7 inning no hitter, instead threw 6, allowing 1 run. He's been fantastic ever since coming over to the Jays. I believe he starts the series against Tampa. Who has been your best Blue Jays offensive player this past week?
Well, it's hard not to go with Vladdy again.
Yeah.
And good for him because that's not something we saw in the first 2 years in the major leagues. So, I think it's great to be able to say that 2 weeks in a row and really 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row. It's been great to see Vladdy. I still have to have him up there as the best offensive player right now.
Just for originality's sake, I want to go with somebody else, but in a week that's had very little offensive output from the Blue Jays, there's no real other option than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I mean, he's continued to be great at the plate, both drawing walks and getting hits. He's been fantastic defensively, much better than expected defensively, and he's been having fun while doing it. So Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think is the only choice for best offensive player of the week for the Blue Jays. Now for the worst player, pitcher, position player, up to you. Who's been the worst Blue Jay of the past week?
All of them. All of them, except for the two we've said, Mats and Guerrero, and that's unfortunate because it has been a tough week. But um, you know, uh, worst, I really don't know. I really don't know. It's tough because there's been some pretty bad performances from the pitching staff. Um, I got nothing. They're all bad.
I mean, I think there are two guys that stick out to me. Um, Marcus Semien is the first. I mean, Semien hasn't hit in weeks. He hasn't
Oh,
hit
I
since the
position
series
players I
against.
hadn't even gotten to, but yes, Semien has been really disappointing. I
Yeah.
think for most of the season, to be
I mean,
honest.
he was great for the first two series of the season. Against the Yankees in New York, he was pretty good. And then against Texas, he was pretty good. And then all of a sudden after that, he just went into a tailspin, and that led to him being taken out of the leadoff spot and Kevin Biggio getting put up there. I mean, it made sense to put Biggio up there with the success that he has getting on base, and then Semien was struggling. So, I mean, it seemed like the perfect spot to put him, and Semien is the worst Blue Jay in my mind in the past week. An argument could be made, though, for Hyunjin Ryu, not necessarily because his game was horrendous. He allowed 4 runs. It wasn't great, but because of the way we expect Ryu to pitch every fifth day, that wasn't what we saw. And so if you're judging based on past performance, I think Hyunjin Ryu has a case to be the worst Blue Jay of the week as well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it was not a good start for him in Boston, and that was a little bit surprising. But definitely Semien on the lineup side for sure was has been pretty disappointing. I mean, Biggio's been disappointing too, but he's always disappointing. It's like
He's not always disappointing.
he's
It's just, but this
he's a
season
good
he
on
seemed to
base guy,
chase
but
more.
yeah,
That's the problem. I mean, and then when they throw him a pitch in the strike zone, he doesn't hit it.
yeah.
So something's up with Biggio, and it needs to be fixed, please.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I sit with worst as well, Ryu and Semien, but with Biggio as a close second from the lineup side of things.
Yeah, moving on now to some early surprises in the big leagues. So far this season, we've seen some serious surprises as certain teams have had some great records early. The Boston Red Sox, who the Jays just faced, are 12-7 atop the AL East. The Royals are 10-7 atop the AL Central. The Mariners are 11-7, just a half game out of the top spot in the AL West. And the Reds are 9-8, who are cooling off a little bit from a really hot start to start the year. But in the NL Central, it's anybody's guess who wins that division. Are any of the four teams just mentioned legitimate playoff contenders?
That's a good question. I would say not the Red Sox.
Wow.
Seattle always finds a way to choke. The Reds,
they got young guys now,
think...
though. The Mariners aren't just relying on a core of veterans. They've got some young prospects who might change that, hopefully, for Mariners fans, but you don't believe in them.
Well, no. I mean, they haven't got exactly the greatest track record in pulling this one off, but I think we'll start to see a shift. I don't think you'll see the Yankees stay this bad. I don't think you'll see the Blue Jays stay this bad. I don't think the Red Sox have the lineup, even though, it is an Alex Cora injection. I think you said that to me the other day, and I agree with you. I think, he's certainly very motivational, and I think that's helped the young guys there to have a good start. But obviously, as people start to hit their groove, I mean, you look at the Blue Jays offense as a prime example, not performing where they're supposed to be, and they still got a win out of that series. I think, when those offenses come around, the Yankees offense, everybody starts to pick up their pitching. You'll start to see a shift in those standings, but I don't see anybody as a totally legit contender just yet in those surprising records, but you never know. Baseball is a surprising game.
Yeah, that it is. And we've seen some crazy starts to the year, both good and bad throughout baseball. I mean, we talked about some of the good ones here, but the Yankees are really struggling to start the season. And I definitely believe they're going to turn things around. That's the Yankees. They've got a great roster. It's just they're not doing it right now. And I think that they will. I think that the Blue Jays will as well. And I think that the Jays have no reason to fear and say that they're not going to make the playoffs. The pitching is questionable, but I think that they will start to turn things around. And some of the games where maybe the pitching gives up 4 runs in a start like Ryu with Springer and Teoscar back, the Jays could just as easily. I mean, those are 2 swings of the bat right there that could get you to 4-4 instead of 4-2, which is where the Jays were at on Tuesday night. So I think that teams are going to start finding their groove a little bit, and they're going to start having more success, which will lead to these other teams like Boston, Kansas City, Seattle, and Cincinnati dropping off a little bit. Boston, the thing is, their offense is there, and it has been. It's been there. It was there last year. They lost Mookie Betts, obviously, in a trade that I don't think I'll ever understand. I get cutting payroll, but I mean, come on, it's Mookie Betts. The offense is still good. The big question was the pitching. And the pitching seems to be all right this year. I mean, we saw Garrett Richards on Wednesday walk 6 batters through 4 1/3 for the Red Sox. And that was not ideal, I'm sure. But for the most part, the pitching hasn't been terrible. And I think that if the Red Sox can pitch, they are the most likely contender out of this group, with Cincinnati being a close second, because Cincinnati is in a similar situation where their offense is very solid. I mean, you got Castellanos, Moustakas, Eugenio Suarez, Nick Senzel, Jonathan India. There are guys that I'm forgetting too. If the pitching is there, and I trust that the rotation can be with guys like Sonny Gray and Luis Castillo, who might be dealt at the deadline, depending on where the Reds are at. I think the bullpen is important for them. I think that they've got a legitimate shot at making the playoffs, especially in the division that they're in, because the NL Central is a mishmash of horrible baseball teams. I mean, no team in there really sticks out as a team that you're like, oh, that team is the clear-cut winner, with that one coming in as a close second. The NL West, you have the Dodgers, who are going to win that division, and then the Padres, who are going to be very, very good, but come up short and get a wild card spot because they're grouped up with the Dodgers. The Milwaukee Brewers can really pitch. I don't know if their offense holds up. If you had to pick one team out of the four that I mentioned, or the Milwaukee Brewers, who is the most legitimate out of these 4 or 5?
You know what? I'm glad you brought up the Milwaukee Brewers because I have a feeling that they're, as usual, the one that's going to come out on top out of all of them.
Yeah.
I agree with you that the Red Sox have a shot for sure, especially with Alex Cora and as you said, the pitching. But I think that Milwaukee always surprises. I mean, they always do. I mean, they're like the Oakland of the National League, right? They're just
That's actually a very
every
good
time you think
comparison.
they're
I didn't think of
down.
that.
Yeah, and every time you think they're down, they're back in the playoff picture. Even if they don't make it, they're at least in the picture, and they're a nuisance to the teams that do make it. So I would say the Brewers for sure.
Yeah, the Brewers, I think, are the most legitimate contender out of those teams. The Red Sox are very close with them. If we're talking just the first four that were brought up, Red Sox far and away are my favorites out of there to make the playoffs. But if you bring in the Brewers, I think the Brewers have a better shot than the Red Sox too. I think they're going to start to cool down. I think we're starting to see that. I mean, Alex Cora is a better manager than Ron Renneke and a better motivator than Ron Renneke. Of course, Cora being suspended or fired for a year, I'm not sure what that was. I don't think he actually ever got suspended, but they just fired him for a year and then brought him back. Renneke wasn't the right fit in Boston. He made a great bench coach for Alex Cora in the World Series winning year. But I mean, you looked at it, and the Red Sox just, they weren't playing with any energy. They weren't a very good team last year, and I think it does not illustrate the team that they truly are, because JD Martinez had a bad year in 2020. Doesn't mean he's going to have a bad year in 2021. It's JD Martinez. He always hits. So I think the Red Sox are the most legitimate contender out of the four teams originally mentioned. The Brewers overtake them if we are including them in the discussion. Moving on to some other storylines from around the league. We got another no-hitter this past week. I mean, it was recorded, or pardon me, the no-hitter took place last Wednesday, but we had recorded by the time that it was completed, so we didn't get to talk about it at all in last week's episode. How crazy is it that we've had 2 no-hitters in April?
I don't think it's crazy at all. I think when you think about the fact that there was a 60-game season last year, the hitters are not where they always have been as far as years past. I think it's a lot easier to, not to say that a no-hitter is easy in any way in the big leagues, but I think it would be easier this year to start off at least than it would be in past years, just because everybody's got a little bit of extra rust due to COVID-19, not because they all had COVID-19 of course, but due to the pandemic itself. And I think that's what you're seeing. I think you're seeing it's taking the hitters some time to catch up to where the pitching is at, because various reasons obviously, and this might be the easier year to get it. Again, not to say that it's easy to get it. It certainly isn't. But again, I'm not all that surprised that we've had 2 no-hitters in the very early going.
I mean, no-hitters are a rare feat. They're hard to accomplish. But I agree with you in the sense that if there was a time to get 2 in a season, it's April 2021, because like you mentioned, I mean, everybody's coming off a shortened season. The bats, a lot of guys struggled at the plate, and they're trying to find their groove again this year. A lot of guys get off to slow starts in general, but that's amplified because of the season that was played last year. And so I think that the no-hitters, I mean, better pitching performances were certainly more likely in the month of April, maybe even going into May in 2021. But I don't know that anybody could have predicted that we would get 2 no-hitters from 2 guys that aren't necessarily like the aces on their staffs. I mean, Carlos Rodon is behind Lucas Giolito for sure, and Lance Lynn and Dallas Keuchel as well for the White Sox. He's probably their 5 starter, but he had a great outing. Joe Musgrove, who just got out of Pittsburgh and was probably maybe their ace, but that's not saying very much. Musgrove is a fantastic pitcher. That's not to take anything away from him, but he's the 3 guy or the 4 guy in San Diego when everybody's healthy, maybe even the 5 starter. So I think that it's been a surprising 2 guys to have no hitters, although Joe Musgrove has always shown the stuff. He's just been in Pittsburgh, so he's struggled in the past. But yeah, and then moving on to another team that we briefly mentioned when we talked about the Milwaukee Brewers, the Oakland A's. They've won 11 straight games. Are the Oakland A's legit this year? We talked about some other teams being legit, but are the A's playoff contenders after starting the year 0-6?
The A's are always legit.
You can't count out the A's.
Legit. You can never count them out, and to have 11 wins in a row early going, what a great start. It's hard to catch up to a team like that. Obviously, they had a rough start to begin with, which has balanced things out a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you can't ever count out the A's. I don't know what else to say about them. They just never surprise me now because you always think, well, this could be it. This is when the A's turn it around and they make the playoffs. And there's some point in every season where they do that, and maybe they've already hit that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they probably have hit that point by now. I mean, they started off really slow, and people were like, "Okay, the A's, who were supposed to be, better than the Astros this year after last year, they aren't doing it right now. What's going on with the A's?" But it's the A's, so they've always got a plan, and they are executing that plan right now. The pitching has been good. The offense is coming around. They just had a crazy. I think the final score of the game against Minnesota yesterday that some of us in Canada got the privilege to see when the Jays were being delayed. That game, I think, ended like 13-12 or 12-11 or something. It was ridiculous, but they're winning these crazy games, and they're winning normal ones as well. So the A's have been off to a great start. Finally, team that has not been off to a great start, the New York Yankees. They can't pitch right now. The bullpen is not there. The fielding, the defense is horrendous. I mean, what is going on with the New York Yankees? I mean, we both say that they're going to turn things around. We both think that they will be, but what do you think has happened with the Yankees so far this year?
Well, I'm not really sure, but Aaron Boone has often said, I've heard him a couple of times on MLB Network Radio, talking about how he's proud of his bullpen, which is interesting. But maybe that's because they're better than at least everything else right now. And even then, they're not that great. Yeah, I'm happy to see it as a non-Yankees fan, and as a Jays fan.
So you got to question the legitimacy of it. Right?
No, and I don't think it is. I think they'll turn it around. They have a lot to turn around, as you just mentioned. There's a lot of categories they're not ticking the boxes in right now. I mean, there's no pitching, there's no relief, and there's no hitting. That's hard to overcome all three of those things. And the fielding, it's hard to overcome all of that. It really is. But if there's any team that's going to do it, it's the Yankee juggernaut that'll turn it around. But again, you mentioned all of the things that are wrong with the Yankees, and that's a lot. I mean, that is a lot. It's another thing to be awful in everything, and to try and overcome that, right? And so, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Yankees. It's only April 22nd. There's no reason to believe they can't turn this around in any way, but it is a rough start. There's no question about that.
Yeah, the Yankees have really struggled to start off the year, but I think they will turn things around. I mean, it's the New York Yankees, right? So they will field a competitive team, or else the fans will riot. So I think that the Yankees will become contenders, and I'm patiently waiting for the day that they do, because I think they will turn things around, and when they do, they'll be the juggernaut that everybody expected them to be. This concludes episode 66 of 211's Baseball Talk. We thank you kindly for tuning in an increasingly sunny episode, and we'll be back next week with some special guests to talk about the first month in the 2021 MLB season.